180 or something.
Yeah,
Whatever
no.
you call it. What am I doing? Oh, great. It's on the video. I'm not even going to edit that part out. Hello.
Organic, hello.
Hello, SoulSync friends. Today we've got Mitchell Travers, who I suspect many of you will know. And if you don't, it's because someone that you know knows him. And at least in these early days, you've been added to the group. Mitch, welcome.
Nice
Really
to be here.
keen. Um, Tell us a little bit about where you are, how you got here,
Mm.
what you've been
Yeah,
up to.
it's a fun story, great story. I guess like this is interesting to do. And oh, just a quick shout out to James for the SoulSync community initiative of doing the interviews. It's been really awesome. And everyone who's joined the community so early on and provided feedback and stuff like that. It's phenomenal to see the way that this is growing. So I guess like where I am right now, I'm co-founder of Soulbis, the sort of research and advisory firm, co-founded with Joey, and we are the guys who I guess came up with the idea to start. Whether or not it's the first, we're claiming to be one of the first Soulbound token communities, and I guess the way that like the reason we thought this was going to be important is that over the last like 9 to 12 months, there has been a lot of like activity and burgeoning up with like a multidisciplined approach around soulbound tokens. I think it's like quite an interesting. It's different. It's different to the way that tokens have been sort of released to the market in the past. Like all the capital-based tokens, whether or not it's people musing about security style tokens or people musing about Bitcoin, ETH, smart contracts, blockchain, stuff like that, it's all steeped in capital value. And the piece that's missing was that like reputation-based value. And Joey and I sort of really recognized that and noticed that there was actually a gap in the market as well for this sort of research and advisory firm to guide either Web2 companies or startups in implementing and thinking and theorizing this technology, because it's pretty crucial, in my opinion. I think it's one of those moments in sort of the emerging technology path that we're going down, of which it will catalyze a particular direction, a particular path for different either jurisdictions, people, groups, communities, whatsoever. Because this is the first time we're dealing with an immutable database and being able to build like personal reputation-based systems on that. So it has to be really nuanced, and that was what inspired SoulSync really, is that we were having conversations with so many different like either startups or institutions or banks or governments or just a massive network, and it was super varied. Like there was a lot of variety in the conversation, but everyone seemed to make sense of soulbound tokens like way quicker than like I've explained Bitcoin hundreds of times to people, and it feels different when I explain soulbound tokens to people. It's almost like finding that middle ground analogy is like accelerated. You don't need to worry about having to go through like this is what a blockchain is, this is what that is. It's like, no, this is a reputation-based token system on a like a blockchain internet of value ledger. So think about like X, think about Y, think about achievements, think about badges. We already have these systems in our like social conscious, and we use them every day. Like going to sort of just friends of friends meetings. So like James and I hanging out, like we don't have to collateralize things. And I've said this so many times. I feel like I'm going on a tangent here, James. Just
No, this
like
is
catch
good.
me.
This is good.
Okay.
Tangent away.
Cool. So I guess like what we wanted to do is really catalyze all of those conversations into one place. So then people with multiple disciplines and multiple approaches to the soulbound token, sort of new layer or primitive that we're theorizing and then starting to build and do experiments around, can access each other without it having to go through either Joey or I. So that was the theory behind it. And of course, like we're very decentralized people. Like I love the idea that as a sort of burgeoning up, like almost regenerative economy style approach to bringing soulbound tokens to the masses is what we're trying to do here. And creating those connections is all well and good in a like a Soulbis business sense. However, there's a time where like a community can sort of grow its own legs and run. And I guess that's what we started in 2 weeks ago, and have been absolutely blown away by how quickly it's starting to run.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point you make. It's not as like when you're trying to explain crypto so far to people and tokens, it's all been attached to why does that have value? Oh, it's got utility. How does utility work? What was the token distribution at the start? How many
Yeah,
VCs are holding bags that are going to dump on me? Why do I even want this thing? But you did have, I guess, for NFTs, maybe the first time was like, well, it's got a community value because their holders are a part of a community and you can access a special Discord or something and everyone's good people and they've got good warm fuzzy vibes, but at the end of the day you still have this like monetary thing where you can't join the community because you don't have $10,000 to buy the NFT,
yeah,
or that's a huge percentage of your portfolio and you basically miss out because you can't afford it. And then a lot of people can see that as a problem, or you've got like gated communities essentially where there's only 10,000 people that can hold a token and some of them have
yeah.
three of them. And I think that like I agree it is easier explaining soulbounds because you're taking at least the initial phase of like capital out of the picture.
Yeah.
You're like it's a thing where you can go and join and establish yourself, and if you participate, whatever the project is, whatever the community is, there might be a structure there where you get a soulbound token that just says, "Hey, you showed up."
Yeah.
Is it worth something? Well, only to you, and only if, as a community,
And
people
that's the
start.
important part.
Yeah,
Is it's like the like with the when you talk about the like capital based value, it will, if capital based value without reputation based value will always lead to plutocracy. And that's what you were sort of talking about, where like there's this plutocratic like barrier to entry. Like I need 10 grand to get in. Or I need like there is the ability for these sort of capital-based NFT communities to have like 50% of the supply, and then distribute that in their own manner, right?
yeah,
However, when it comes to Soulbound tokens, as you were rightfully saying, like no matter what you do, it can create history in that community, and that history builds like accountability, reputation, and those sorts of aspects, which like happens in the real world all the time. And we just do it naturally as humans, like as like tribal beings. So that, yeah, like bringing that into Web3 seems natural for people. I think like the one thing I would like to sort of caveat though with that, it's simple to explain Soulbound tokens in the first instance to people. However, the moment you start getting into the nuances behind key management, privacy, zero knowledge proofs, and these sorts of things, it does start to really ramp up and get quite complex, because there needs to be such a unique aggregation of technologies which have only just emerged in the last 5 to 10 years for this to even fucking be possible, like in the first place.
yeah.
Um, so
So you go and build a community of multiple disciplines, different verticals, interested in the same topic or subtopic, and say like, how do we
mm,
fix all these little long tails? Because there is a lot of long tails. There's a lot of implications with it. And
yeah,
each,
like we got
you know,
like there was a comment in the SoulSync community literally an hour ago, which is talking about whether or not soulbound tokens should exist before zero knowledge proofing exists, right? Like as just a general rule. Like, should we even be working and implementing and introducing soulbound tokens before zero knowledge is possible? Because that does that change the trajectory of the technology to be sort of, yeah, it's a fantastic question from one of the community members, and I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone collaborating on it. My personal opinion on that question is that like you just have to start with the non-offensive use cases, like an achievement badge for a game for killing a boss. Like it doesn't matter if that's immutable and publicly available on any sort of given blockchain, for good. But yeah, maybe we do have sort of these barriers in place for other types of soulbound tokens before zero knowledge proofing is possible,
Yeah,
like the identity or the KYC pieces.
gotcha. And I guess so zero knowledge, as in you are left with a way to prove that you hold the soulbound token without having to reveal.
The underlying data and reputation that was generated, or the activity, or
Yep. That's yeah, I mean, chicken and the egg, but also
yeah,
start with the non-offensive use cases.
yeah,
And maybe there's some things where a higher sort of a person or a representation of a person or group, by a wallet that holds a higher level of, responsibility to a community might have to reveal more.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Well,
so how would it
that's
work?
sort of part of the beauty of soulbound tokens, right? Is that the composability and of the attributes that can sit within what's known as like a soul wallet means that it is up to the person to reveal as much or as little as they would like, and then create an agreement with the other party for how much they would need in order to trust that person in an on-chain environment, right? So there are those composable aspects, which I think is super important, to get away from sort of the way that identity has been done to date. Where like the common bartender problem, where a bartender knows where you live, when all they need to know is you're over the age of 18, right? Um,
Yep.
so yeah, I think that that's very possible. Looking forward to experimenting actually with the SoulSync community on some of these novel use cases too, that are non-offensive. I think that we can like almost act as like a standards setting and experimental place for the builders and the academics and the other people in the ecosystem of this multidisciplined approach, to create examples that when people start looking into implementing soulbound tokens for their own projects or business or whatsoever, they can look at the SoulSync community as this sort of this body or collection of people who have thought about this seriously and has sort of evidence-based outcomes of the Soulbound token projects that they think are actually sustainable. Or maybe we have a Soulbound project in SoulSync that we're like, oh my God, that was such a bad idea. And we do a report on that. So then the rest of the world can learn from that. That's sort of like some of the ideas that I'm interested in exploring with this community.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some breaking things.
Yeah.
If you were to, I guess, zoom back out for a sec, on the one hand, we've got the current sort of crypto approach to doing things where everything is essentially monetized or capitalized or can be bought
Mhm.
and sold. And then the flip or the inverted is you've got soulbound tokens, you can't transfer them, at least like without going into the nuance. The
Yeah.
idea, if you hold it, it means that you earned it because you were given it and you can't have transferred it. You can't have bought it on a secondary market later. And as a result, you can start to use that to indicate like your position on things or your participation or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And that is, I guess, by default, non-capitalized.
Mhm.
Um, I guess we all know that um, capital helps. Capital helps makes things happen. It
Of
makes
course.
people be able to work full time on stuff and really focus on where they're able to be valuable.
Mhm.
How do you kind of see the progression where um, ecosystems will need funding? They'll need
Yeah.
that to be productive. They'll need to be able to generate value and distribute value and allocate and so on. Is it going to be, I guess, like a hybrid kind of future where there's mixes of both? Um, what's your kind of thinking? Like, if I've
Mm.
established myself in a community, can someone pay me on the side to vote a certain way? How do we defend against that?
Yeah.
Do I erode my reputation if I vote in a direction that's like inconsistent with past behavior or what I've said? Can someone challenge it? And
Mhm.
a committee of elected by reputation people in a healthy, transparent way slash me for doing it. Like,
Mhm.
where do you start to see the nuances kick in to things that are like pretty serious in terms of hard
Yeah.
problems that need to be solved?
Yeah, and I think that like that question's really well framed. So I think like for me, like money just generally, it's like society's debt to you, right? Like it's you did something good, you earn money, so then you can save your time or something later, right? Money is used as like a function, and I'm sort of replacing money with capital with money here, to answer your question. However, how does society know how much they should pay you for those things that you do? How does like society know like what the value is, or whether or not they can trust you to deliver on that value? So that's where I think that relationship of the hybrid model comes in, where you have this reputation that's growing over time as a community member, and that is used to justify capital-based injections, to either the projects that you're running in association with that community, or perhaps even funding, or maybe I'm like a treasurer, and I'm a treasurer for like a whole bunch of different DAOs. And those DAOs actually seek me out as a treasurer because I have a bunch of Soulbound tokens, which has said that I was treasurer of XYZ DAO for 2 years, and here's my wallet signature every time that I checked that the balances were correct, and I provided audit and proof of funds and reserves and stuff like that, is actually recognized to my sort of treasury soulbound identity. Right. So that's sort of where I see the interplay happening, is it actually allows for Web3 to allocate capital more effectively, to the right people, and for that to actually also build over time. So say for example, I make a huge mistake in treasury, and like we will be talking about negative reputation a whole bunch. And you did mention earlier, like we need systems for that reputation to either like be forgotten, or like it can't exactly always sit there. So where was I going with that? Like I guess what I was trying to say is the relationship between the two is inherent in the real world. However, we have to codify it in the blockchain world, and that's where this comes in. And that's a really nuanced approach. And in order to solve those problems that you were mentioning around like voting, or around like wrench attacks for like my identity, like if I was attacked in person and forced to vote in a particular way, that went against like a lot of the things that I had done to date, maybe that is valuable information for the community to know as like a flag. And the only way that that's possible is for those votes to be recorded and available to the community, and my historical sort of the way that I've historically acted. So yeah, I think that like it's both going to open a whole bunch of problems, but it will also provide solutions to the problems that we see today, in crypto around capital being dominant.
Yeah, because I guess it kind of introduces trust
Yeah,
uh, into crypto when crypto so far has done its best to try
trustless.
and be trustless. So it doesn't
Yes,
matter who it is, you know exactly how it works. And from that, you can like
absolutely.
have transparency in that if the contract says if A then B, it's going to do if A then B if A happens.
Yes.
Um,
But the only problem to date with that being in crypto is not everyone can read a contract. So how do you establish trust for the masses? And the way to establish trust for the masses is to use the wisdom, almost like the wisdom of the crowd, and create reputation systems underlying. So this is like one of the Soulbound token ideas that I've got, is that you've got a whole bunch of DeFi smart contracts. And when people like effectively interact with them, and sort of there are audits done, they can be a Soulbound token, which is like a proof of audit concept. I'm sure a whole bunch of the community members,
mm,
I've already spoken to a few of them about this. But that would be a artifact which is available on an immutable database, that a protocol company, whether or not it's a 2.5 blockchain company, or whether or not it's like a layer 1, a layer 2, they can rely on that data to then help inform customers. So then the customers can, or consumers can be safe, right? Like if I go to a smart contract, which is a new smart contract that was sent to me, some random dude, and I start to have a look, might be able to identify the fact that that smart contract was giving permission to unlock my wallet and spend all of my USDC. But I've been in the space for a long time, man. Like, and I've lost money that way before.
Yeah.
So I've been through that experience and I have that experience, but not everyone does. And that's why we need to have these flags and signals for the greater consumer. And that's where I see that this, like, it sort of, as you were saying, it sort of equalizes the trust. It means that you
Yeah.
don't have to operate in a trustless environment anymore, which is
Yeah.
really important for like people who are not like hyper crypto. And they're the people we're trying to get on board, because if we don't get those people on board, we'll just trend towards centralization.
Yeah, like it's all well and good to say, yeah, I mean the contract did what it said, it was trustless. What do you expect? And then the flip side is like, how do you weight um,
Yes,
whether or not the contract is likely to be performant and audited
exactly.
and all of those things. I guess it gets tricky when you still have a lot of instances going back. You know, we improve over time, but there's plenty of good projects that were fully audited that had a lot of
Mm,
volume, big money, um, that went under because there was, you know, a vulnerability that eventually was exploited.
yeah.
And then on the flip side, you've also got companies that were perceived to be high trust, although we couldn't see inside them, especially over the last 12 months that have gone
Hmm.
and blown up.
Yeah,
So I guess, yeah, it's just another tool. Perhaps doesn't solve everything, but it starts to walk towards it. Um,
exactly.
it's an interesting one when like the idea of negative impact of I guess maybe like association. So if I'm on Twitter saying this thing's great, like I use it every day, you should use it, and then it blows up, everyone goes back and deletes all the tweets.
Yeah.
You know, they go back and try and bury that. And on the one hand, you're like, well, if that person's shilling something in future, I want to have that historical context.
Hmm.
But then you've got the tricky balance of like, um, people make mistakes,
Yeah,
and
you need the
the
ability to forget.
next thing that that person is getting behind might be more informed because they have had experiences that have led to that.
Exactly.
Um, and I don't know what the right balance is. I guess if there's, I guess it's up to the community, right? But at
Well,
least
yeah,
you can have the
and
data
this is what we're
that,
trying to explore with like SoulSync and a bunch of the other work with think tanks that we're doing, is that there needs to be an interesting balance struck, but for multiple different um, like industry layers, relationships, communities. So yeah, it's one of those hard problems that we really need to come together and collaborate on. Um, Especially when it comes to negative reputation, because there are some things that you do want to be available, but like that example that you were saying before, like that's clear cut to me that realistically, if I did a whole bunch of tweets about a particular protocol, I wouldn't want that to sit immutably on chain. Like that's like, yes, it was my opinion at the time, but opinions change. Um, Now maybe alternative to that is, if I had a particular affinity with the protocol, then I might mint a Soulbound token to indicate that at this point in time, I thought this protocol was good. However, there are ways to reverse your opinion, right? Like you can say, no, I disagree with what I was thinking about at the time, and that diminishes the value of the original Soulbound token that I created, because I've now since have a new reputation attribute or a new Soulbound token, which counters what it was before. So it
yeah,
really has to grow over time, and I think that we need to start talking about life cycle management, half-lives, different concepts that we can work on to make, because not everything should be on chain, and but the things that are on chain have to be really purposeful. So yeah.
yeah. Maybe if it's like your voting or behavior is like private, but
Mhm.
then if you vote for something that like contradicts that behavior, it like it's either worth less weight in the vote or
Mhm.
it like pushes the reveal. So like you have to go, okay, I'm voting different to how I normally vote. or maybe you end up with a position of like number of people that voted across the line, whatever they call it, when they cross the house.
Yeah,
Um,
across the floor.
yeah. It's definitely an interesting one. I do
Mm,
worry that the game that I guess this Soulbound play in, along with a lot of other crypto topics, is kind of like it's very easy to imagine a future state when it all gets adopted, when the network effect is there, because a lot of the stuff relies on network effect.
mhm,
Um, it's easy to see a future where it's all kind of done, and everything clicks in, and you can say, yeah, this makes sense because that also does this and this does that. Um, and that creates, I think, also a paralysis kind of
yeah.
experience where it's like, shit, I don't know where to start. How do you work backwards from a desired state? Um, wait, I guess I don't know if this is too spicy, but like, where do you kind of see the next sort of what are the baby steps here? What's something that
Mm.
could be done with Soulbounds that's fairly harmless, doesn't expose people to a whole lot of risk, and can start to like spur the conversation or get some use cases going? Are you kind of
Yeah, I've got a
cool?
few.
Hit me.
Yeah, so I think like just generally community participation, um, like the participation award is a great first use case, and it starts having like these sort of communities and DAOs and different groups thinking about using Soulbound tokens, but with a like a non-offensive thing. So I remember like Gitcoin grants. One of the first things that they did was this like NFT badge called Kudos, and like a kudo was like just saying that yeah, I had done this like particular course on Gitcoin, or yeah, I've donated X to X on Gitcoin. So it's these like achievement badges which act as flags of outcomes that you've achieved in a community sense that may or may not have capital value associated to them, or time that you've spent associated. So I think that that's like probably going to be one of the first really sort of big like communities are just going to default into, hey, here's a soulbound token for this, here's a soulbound token for that, and that will slowly build up this like per community graph or
Yep.
per network or per institution.
Yep. It doesn't even
Go,
need to be used for anything. It's like you just
no,
stamping it and it's
yes,
there, and then come back in 2 years and be like, okay, let's figure out how
it
to.
actually may like
Yeah, okay.
this now can sort of one thing can lead to another. So I think that that will be one of the early on stages. But in saying that, I think that um, most of the larger sort of firms and practitioners and people of multiple industries know that like this identity and data wallet game is huge. It's probably like just as big an industry that as like capital markets in the future. Like
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of feels
it's a
a
like the
foundation,
underlay
or
to
yeah.
exactly. So like a lot of people are going to increase their involvement and start experimenting and things like that. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. Um, I guess like that's why we're trying to create this diversified conversation between the two, because
Mm,
it would be more likely for an NFT community to do a non-offensive soulbound use case and create really good primary data first
yeah.
before we get into like the institutional KYC kind of stuff.
I just yeah, I agree. I
Mm.
I just had a thought, and I
Mhm.
feel like it just fit real well in my mind. Played a those games that's like pay to play
Yep.
versus games where the cosmetics that don't affect the gameplay,
Yep.
like you can buy and sell and trade those. So like you might change how you look, but it
Mhm.
doesn't it increase your ability to like beat other players or
Yeah,
whatnot.
doesn't give you an unfair advantage.
Maybe that's a good sort of
Analogy, I like it.
analogy where like you,
Mm.
you can only get ahead in the community, like different use cases, different communities, whatever, but like
Yeah,
a
no,
scenario where
totally.
you can only get ahead and have more um, you know, ability to influence by participating, but you can like get some cool looking bits and pieces that maybe make things more fun.
Yeah, yeah, based on the things that you do. Like, I mean, yeah, totally. I think that that's a good analogy to provide. Like, um, I go into like Dota 2 is one of the first games that did that cosmetic free to play, but they make more money now after releasing cosmetic like than they could ever imagine if they were charging $50 per license to run the game.
Yeah.
So I think that that's like it's an interesting analogy, and it does have reputation weight in the game. Like I go into the game and over time my stats are recorded, and when I enter, like, yes, it's a completely fair playing field. My character looks awesome because I've played it. I've got experience on that particular character. And then when I get into the game, everyone can see that I'm level 15 for this character. I've got 150 games. I've got 75% win streak. I have this like cool skin.
Are these your real stats?
I just like pulling them out of the air.
Damn.
But like yeah, they're close to it. 75% win rate is a bit optimistic. It's definitely closer to 50%. But that says something about how many games have been played. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, so I think that that's how that's where I would take that analogy, is that we're all starting a game. It's a group of 9 random people. Yeah, you can party with your friends, but it's a group of 9 random people that I'm starting to game with. 4 are on my team, 5 I'm against. I want to know a little bit of reputation when we get into this game of like, does this guy know how to play carry? Does this guy know how to play this, that, and the other?
Yeah.
Is this hero that like maybe is this hero that he picked, like, should I focus on him because he's inexperienced with that hero as opposed to over here? And that's talking about like the opposition, but I could
Mm.
talk about our team as well. Like if someone on our team, we enter the same lobby and I got the carry role and I'm less experienced with the carry role, but I can see his reputation is like he always plays carry, then maybe we'll
Yeah.
swap roles, right? And this
Maybe.
is like creating organization at first instance in a decentralized like origination, right? Like as much as like it all had to be people queuing at the same time on one game is fairly centralized, but the way that we were matched with each other uses like a matchmaking algorithm, so then our skills are matched, but it's largely decentralized, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't get to like unless I party with people and that's a different game mode, I'm getting random people every time.
Yeah. I can see like a lot of
It creates collaboration
there's some good analogy there.
pathways. Yeah.
Um, I guess maybe one thing I do think is worth exploring more is like you kind of want a way that when someone contributes or submits or responds like to an idea and they're saying that might not work because of this, or someone saying it should be like that, you don't just want someone that's been around for longer and been active
To over.
to have like even like the perception of more merit. So,
Mhm.
because like when I play games, I actually don't like to know what the other players are like.
Yeah,
I like to get a feel for it and do it kind of that way,
I get that.
because otherwise I find that I'm like, oh, this is going to be a shit game. Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and then I am like, it affects my own ability to play, I guess. But if I
Or like,
walk in, I
mm,
like everyone's got a clean slate, new game. That's kind of how I kind of do it. But not always. But maybe there's like a way of pooling different
yeah,
perspectives, and then like after it's come to agreement, you then like do the
you
reveal
reveal.
or
Yeah.
something like or maybe if you're like challenged, it's like kind of like pokerish, where like
Oh
you're like,
yeah.
no,
Until
like
you call my bluff, you show the
this is what
hand.
it should be, and someone's like, you've got no like you're like if someone's positioning as I'm an expert in this field, then it's
Mhm.
in this like vertical thing. It's like if enough people go like, show us that you are, because we're about to rely on your like maybe it's like a subjective decision and
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of objective kind of things to point to, and someone's saying trust me on this one, you're
Mm.
like, let's do a reveal, show us the cards, and they're like,
Yeah.
well, that'll cost X, and then you do like a little I don't know.
No, totally. And that's why it needs to be composable, because I need to choose what I think I would like to reveal in order to get that trust from those people.
mm,
Um, like they shouldn't just be able to pick and choose the stuff that they learn about me, in order to get that validation.
yeah, Yeah.
However, if they want that validation of my expertise, I'll know what I need to share with them. And that being available to me in a composable manner, and then being able to prove that happened for a particular community is super valuable.
Yep.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know if I guess there's no real structure to these hangouts anyway. For those in the SoulSync community watching, you're just like subject to a little riff with Mitch and I. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'm just gonna go on a whim and think it's probably fun anyway. If you had like, if you're looking for community input on a like as an issue, I guess maybe in that you could set the conditions of you're only allowed to submit your position if you're going to reveal like A, B, and C, and then have your submission count towards like it kind of like contributing to your overall position on
Yeah.
the topic. And it's kind of like I know not everyone's a gamer, but like you can play ranked where your outcome, like your how well you do, contributes to like a scoring system that will
Mhm.
rank your player and queue you with different, better or worse based on your performance.
Yep.
Whereas maybe the analogy is here, like you can have open contribute and there's no like soulbound attachment,
Ranking.
or
Yeah.
you could have one where you're only allowed to contribute if you've got a proof that like
I love that.
if you're discussing the outcome of like something that happened at an event, it's like, well, you have to have been at the event to contribute because
Mhm.
otherwise you weren't
Yeah. Like show
there.
me your PO app,
Maybe.
Soulbound. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that, and creating that difference between this, like almost like the first one where it's not ranked is kind of like everyone's allowed to participate, everyone receives like a soulbound token for participating, and then maybe those soulbound tokens have uniqueness
Mm,
to that person's particular sort of contribution. But those are actually activities which are trying to build the greater community up to get into this sort of more ranked space where
mm,
like we actually have to provide evidence and proving, like proof of reference, like this is where I understand my blockchain technology information, like this is why I'm providing evidence because it's from here and I can prove that I've spent time over there, which validates the fact that I can provide this here.
yeah.
So yeah, I actually really like just kind of getting my head going here, having that split between like this almost like public participatory angle to the generation of soulbound token sort of communities and networks and value for people in
Mm,
a more permissionless way, like decentralized values, but then have this like permissioned environment which relies on soulbound tokens being used as proofs for
yeah.
contribution and participation because it needs a high level of trust.
Yeah. And I think the only way that you can end up doing that for complex issues is when you have like a much larger amount of collective adoption and history.
Exactly.
Like day
Yeah.
one, everyone's just got one soulbound. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. No,
there's no,
totally.
yeah,
Which is why like it
start on
starting with
small
those novel ones to begin
baby
with, which are public,
examples.
is probably the better way to do it anyway, because we don't want people to try and game, like everyone's
Mm,
always going to try and game these soulbound token reputation systems, which is why reputation economics is like a super important subset to this technology for us to understand and build models around.
yeah.
Um, because like this is what happens in gaming. Like people learn the algorithm. This is what happens on Twitter. This is what happens whenever you have an algorithm to do these like analyses and provide like matching for people. Is there's always going to be people who game the system. So you like you can make soulbound token sort of reputation resistant to that through these sort of methods that we were talking about, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
Mm, that
Cool.
one's really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can go a lot longer. I think for future sessions, it'd be good to we'll just chuck a big Zoom up and everyone can join.
Yeah, like a SoulSync
Um,
roundtable. That's actually a
yeah,
great idea.
yeah. And we'll have like a stick that just passes to the next person after like
Conch.
3 minutes
Mm,
or something. Just have a little riff. Because it's easy to rabbit hole. And I think probably the biggest challenge is, yeah, bringing it back to practical
yeah.
steps so that we can get one
which
thing going and then use that for a second thing.
yeah, it's very real.
I don't know how long we've been going for. I've been trying to keep these short.
And
Let's
half an hour.
probably okay, a bit of room there. What do you think other challenges are? Like, what do you think is going to be the blockers here?
The SoulSync or Soulbound tokens?
Soulbound
Yeah.
tokens, or maybe SoulSync. Like,
Okay.
I guess yeah. What do you think? Where do you think SoulSync goes from here? And like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty.
I'd like to answer that question. So I think like for me, I would love to see SoulSync grow into this sort of open community that's able to support people exploring using Soulbound tokens in in a way in which is actually resourced with expertise. And I think that that's quite important. So that's why we've sort of in a way started SoulSync in more of an invite only manner. For at least the first 100 or 200 people in the chat. Like obviously anyone can read the newsletter and get our ideas and views and opinions. Um, but I would like to build I would like SoulSync to build itself into a community that's able to respond to Soulbound token challenges more generally and leverage their own independent business and things that they do and technology that they create in order to like create a like collaborative commons around Soulbound tokens as SoulSync more generally. And then whether or not projects emerge out of that, whether or not Soulbound tokens are issued to all community members, which turn into like DAO-based reputation and those sorts of things. I'm happy and open for whatever people are interested in pursuing. And just like in the way that sort of you've jumped up and started interviewing us, like that's awesome. So I see SoulSync going towards this almost Soulbound Commons, which I want to say DAO, but I don't want to say DAO too quickly. Is kind of where I'd like for this, or where I envisage this going towards. And I think it's actually going to be quite important because most communities, or at least like a lot of the DAO-based communities, come out of protocols and come out of NFTs, and like they all have interest. And yes, we have interest, but our interest is in a technology primitive. It's not in XYZ Soulbound token platform community proliferating. We have
Right.
we have 4 or 5 Soulbound token builders in the community already, and they're all looking to collaborate with each other. So I think that that's quite important to sustain. Is this it's like a pseudo permissioned way to get in to begin with until we build critical mass around expertise in Soulbound tokens, and then open it up to the greater community and network of the world to share that expertise in different mediums and ways, right? Like I've been in enough 2,000 people Telegram chats to know that the moment you get over 250 in a Telegram chat, it's like it starts to
Messy.
lose its effectiveness. So we have to start thinking about different tools. So yeah,
Yeah, I think
that's a
I guess there's an opportunity or a window here to remain agnostic.
mhm,
And because like everyone can um like I'm doing these because I'm interested in soulbounds and I figured it's gonna be a good way to meet people and that's
yeah,
fun and learn stuff and that's fun too. Um, but I guess over time, like you've got different people working for different companies, they've got different projects, they're all interested in soulbounds, and then trying to almost be like a what do you call it? Like just removed from that incentive kind of framework,
yeah,
but also cognizant of those like people have to make a living.
absolutely.
And there's like it's easy to think, oh, people just want to get rich. It's like sure, but people also need to make a living. So how do you make an agnostic community that is like trying not to lock down on anything but connect stuff? When to build that kind of community and grow that and maintain it, it still requires resource.
Time, people, money.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess like projects that benefit could feed back in as like a social good or something. public good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, but I guess it's up to the people in the SoulSync community. I think
Yeah.
like one
And
flip
I want to
side would
make
be
that very
like,
clear.
how's this decentralized if you're gating who can participate for the first X many people? Um,
I think that's an important question, and like out of this call, we should probably think about it and discuss it in the community. But I guess the logic behind that to begin with was like Joey and I and Soulbis has kind of got this reputation as the Soulbound token guys now. We've written a paper on it, and people reach out to us who are intimately interested. So we act as almost like the initial
you've got
quality control.
the original, the initial reputation before it's reflected as a
Yeah,
token, I guess.
exactly.
And I mean, it makes sense. Like if you just open it up, it turns to shit day one. You've got every
Absolutely.
right
Yeah,
to try and at least steer it for enough time that makes sense so that the values that like you're building it around are established. And maybe if people don't like that, they can make their own, I guess.
absolutely. A derivative.
Like, yeah,
That's yeah, you're more than welcome to. But I think like that's a really good point actually. We in the future we could use soulbound tokens as a way to permission people to invite others to the community based on their involvement. So it's almost like it's a reward for participation and commitment and reputation you've generated in the community. You're able to sort of invite others to join in the conversation.
yeah.
I know that there are all sorts of problems that we'll have to explore when
It
that
gets
becomes an idea. It gets very,
so
yeah,
tricky so fast.
yeah.
Someone
Like, I
comes in
mean,
with a,
Clubhouse is just
yeah,
like, yeah, like Clubhouse was a really good experiment for that reason, but the drop off, like people just wanted to get on Clubhouse because it was a one-to-one permission network to get involved in. But then the amount of people who like were like asked calling friends for their invite link and then never logged into the platform again
yeah.
would be significant. So,
They wanted the invite to give the invite to then leave.
right,
But
like
even like
it's
people, like someone might have enormous value to give, and because of this like weighting system of
yes,
you can only talk in the main channel if you've achieved 3 tokens and
mhm,
we're here at the start, and then everyone else talks down in this area and has to earn your way up. Like it doesn't solve the problem. Um,
yeah,
but I guess if you're in the SoulSync community, like chuck in a thought.
please,
And I think there's enormous value to try and work out who's working on the same thing and can we like shuffle a
yeah,
bit and work on 2 different things and still have that be valuable to everyone. That kind of stuff I think is really cool.
yeah. Get rid of the information asymmetry. Just
Yeah,
to, yeah,
yeah. All right. I think we'll
nice.
probably wrap it up there. This has been fun.
Yeah, hopefully the
And
first of a few.
yeah, yeah, we'll have to do another one.
Mm,
Love it. And
sweet.
I will read that paper.
Please
It's
do.
it's the weekend, so
Yeah,
I'm
take your time. It's a long paper.
no,
We're
it's
actually
I'm
like
gonna
a
read the
like
whole thing this weekend. I'm committing that to you now.
okay,
And
sweet.
it's
Well, send
recorded.
me your thoughts. We're actually like with that's one of the pieces of feedback on the paper is that it's a little bit too long. Like this thing, if we put it into Medium, it would be like half an hour to an hour and a half read, indicated on the thing. So, or even more, maybe a 2 hour
No,
read,
it would have to be more.
3 hour read, perhaps even.
100 pages?
Yeah,
No, that's if it's half hour, I would then I've massively overestimated what's involved.
it's not half hour.
No, I
That
think
was
it's a good
yeah.
two
It's a
plus.
two plus hour. Yeah, so that's one of the actual feedback that we got from a lot of people is that it's too long. And that spurred us into sort of some of the content channels and pipelines for SoulSync. So part of the plan for SoulSync's newsletter is to actually digest some of those ideas more intimately week on week. So I
Yeah.
think last week I spoke about like the account abstraction because it was very pertinent at the point in time and made reference to Chris's like right to be forgotten tweet. Now the right to be forgotten was explored extensively. Well, over 2 paragraphs and a few quotes from Nat Sakamura and the principles of identity in the paper. So that's part of the idea of the SoulSync newsletter, is to really pull on these papers and academic resources that we've got access to on the topic,
Yep.
and then add that to more bite-sized conceptualized pieces and topics of exploration that we want to facilitate or are facilitated by the community.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost adopt the way that Ray Dalio does his stuff. It's like there's a whole book, and then there's the audio book, a little bit easier, and then there's like broken down posts, and then there's like
Yes.
a 30-minute video, and it's like makes it like you could do that kind of
Layers of digest.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Not everyone has 4 hours or
yeah,
the actual motivation to read Soulbound token paper. But
yeah,
if people have access to the ideas, I think it is going to be really good for society.
yeah.
So
No, I agree. I imagine I'll flick through some parts faster than others.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
So
let's wrap it up there. And if
nice.
you haven't read the paper, read the whole paper in one sitting. That's what you must do.
And
And
write your feedback as well into the SoulSync community. It'll be
yeah,
fun.
yeah, do it. Alrighty. Take
Sweet.
care. Good to have a
Peace out.
chat.
You too.